Dun 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 Time to create a field. What I should have did is took that tree, the bushwhacker, and cut all those trees down. Oh well. I could play a documentary if anybody is interested. I can play a documentary. Okay. Fuck, did I hit a tree stump? Yeah, I did too. I missed a fucking tree stump. Give me 1 sec. Let me get this going here. Oh, okay. Alright, documentary time. Oh yeah, documentary. Whoops, sorry. Yo, what's up, Ryan? I having a alright day. Got renovations done. They're out of the way. Yeah. Just gonna play some documentaries. It's been a good day. That's all I gotta say. Tired, but it's been good.
Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Unhealthy relationships with a cruel person and a narcissist never lead to anything good. It's crucial to realize this in time and break off such connections before a tragedy occurs. Emotional abuse is typically just the beginning and a prelude to physical violence, which the abuser will use to control and dominate their partner, suppress them, and create an atmosphere of constant oppression and fear. Our story today revolves around a popular Chinese blogger, Lamu, whose tragic end a few years ago shocked all of China. Lamu, a simple girl from a poor family, captivated a large audience with her kindness, sincerity, and boundless love for nature, and met a horrific end at the hands of her once loved partner. The most chilling part of this incident is that the assault on her was broadcast live, and thousands of followers could only watch helplessly. Who was Lamu? Lamu was born in 1990 in Nyawa Tibetan and Xiang Autonomous Prefecture, Sichuan Province, China. She was the youngest of 3 children in a very poor family that barely made ends meet. She grew up with her older biological sister and stepbrother in a home shared with their parents and grandmother. Their family collected rare medicinal plants, which they sold in local pharmacies for a meager income. After completing only 3 grades, Lamu had to leave school to work with her family members and help support them. Along with the adults, she climbed high into the mountains, where at certain times and in special places, they could find the rarest herbs and flowers with healing properties. Lamu was well versed in these plants and had a sincere love for nature, admiring its beauty and generosity, and drawing strength and inspiration from the mountains. As social media popularity grew, she created her own account on a Chinese equivalent of TikTok. There, Lamu posted short videos showcasing her daily life, household activities, and the beauty of her native province. She called herself a mountain girl and had a deep affection for her work. Unlike many bloggers, she was not chasing fame. Fame found her. Her audience adored Lamu for her smile, purity, and almost childlike spontaneity. She never prepared content in advance, speaking her mind and feelings, and sometimes singing folk songs while showcasing the mountain landscapes. Lamu never used makeup or filters. Her hands and feet bore calluses, scratches, and scars, visibly evidencing the hard and long labor behind them. Gradually, Lamu's subscriber count grew, and not only locals but also tourists visiting the area began to recognize her. They referred to the blogger as that sweet mountain girl, offered warm words, expressed gratitude for her work, and asked for photos. Lamu was not proud of her fame, but she was delighted that her activities resonated with the audience and brought joy to others. In her youth, Lamu constantly went to the mountains with her parents and older sister, but as her sister grew up, got married, and moved to another province, and her parents, due to age, could no longer climb high or for long, Lamu took on all the work herself. She detailed to her followers the flora of the local area, explaining which specific flowers and herbs had what properties, how to collect them, and how to use them as food without accidentally harming the body. During certain seasons, Lamu could spend several weeks alone in the mountains, gathering medicinal plants. She showed how she set up camps for the night, cooked her meals over a campfire, shared local legends and beliefs, and returned with a large and heavy backpack that seemed to weigh more than she did. But this strong, brave, and hard-working beauty never elicited pity, because she glowed with happiness when engaging in her beloved activities in the mountains, despite returning tired, worn out, and with bloody calluses. Despite never complaining about her tough fate and hard daily labor, Lamu long avoided one topic. She did not discuss her personal life because she suffered for many years at the hands of her abusive husband, Tong Li, enduring beatings and humiliations, but she tried not to show that she was deeply unhappy. Who is Tong Li? Tong Li was also a native of Sichuan province, born in 1990 into a simple and quite modest family. His parents adored their youngest son, indulging him from an early age, always striving to spoil and please him. At the age of 12, he quit school and started working as a courier, delivering groceries to local stores. He earned little but kept all the money to himself, not helping his family at all. Even then, the teenager began to show signs of greed, avarice, and narcissism. He believed the world revolved around him, that others owed him, but he owed nothing to anyone. Desperate to become wealthy, he was willing to do anything, even break the law. And that's precisely what happened. At 15, Tong left home, fell in with the wrong crowd, and began dealing in banned substances and petty theft, also dabbling in gambling, and took pride in getting away with it. He aimed to earn respect in the criminal underworld, become rich, and escape the poverty he grew up in. Sometime later, Li's parents opened their own small spice and tea shop, investing all their efforts and resources into it. The business quickly took off, generating a decent income, and the family soon became well off by local standards. At that point, Tong decided to return home and offered to help expand and promote the family business. In reality, he just wanted to live off his relatives, who worked hard daily. Tong considered himself successful and wealthy, spending money on personal luxuries, boasting to friends about his expensive items, and behaving selfishly, even claiming the store's success as his own. Meanwhile, he kept in touch with local criminals, maintaining a separate under-the-table business with them. First Love. Tong and Lamu met when they were just 17. The young man was so enchanted by her beauty, kindness, and sincerity that he was head over heels in love. He courted her earnestly, giving gifts, and it seemed he was ready to change for her, become more mature and serious and cut ties with the criminal world. The young and naive Lamu quickly fell for his charms, believing she had met her Prince Charming, with whom she would be happy. No one had ever courted her so diligently before, and no one had tried so hard to win her over. Soon, the young couple developed a romantic relationship that lasted almost 2 years before they decided to make it official. As soon as Tong turned 19, he proposed to his beloved, who eagerly accepted. However, their parents were not thrilled about their decision to marry. They tried to dissuade the young couple, believing they were too young to start a family, but the young lovers wouldn't listen to anyone. In 2009, they got married, and the newlywed wife moved into her mother-in-law's house. Lamu's personal hell. Initially, married life seemed quite blissful. Tong tried to be a good husband, left behind his bad influences and gambling, focusing on his young wife and the family business. Lamu took on almost all the household duties and also helped her beloved's parents in their shop. However, it wasn't long before her husband started disappearing with his old friends again. He returned to his unlawful activities, frequently consumed alcohol, and his behavior towards his wife drastically changed. Tong was no longer the gentle, kind, and caring man Lamu had fallen in love with a few years earlier. He became crude, self-centered, and aggressive. He took a portion of the store's earnings from a business where all the family members worked except for him, claiming it as his share, and spent all the money on his own needs, entertainments, and pleasures. The couple started arguing frequently. Lamu tried to reason with her husband, urging him to get his act together, work honestly, quit drinking, and stop associating with people from the criminal world. But Tong wouldn't listen to either his wife or his mother, believing no one had the right to tell him what to do. According to his parents' recollections, conflicts in their home became a daily occurrence. The situation didn't change even when Lamu became pregnant. Her husband continued to vanish with his friends, and when he returned home, he was rough and aggressive. He was annoyed that his wife was now more focused on herself and their future child. He himself, like a child, demanded attention, and during one disagreement, he raised his hand to her for the first time. Lamu was shocked by her husband's action and declared she would return to her parents' home, as she refused to tolerate such treatment. At that moment, her mother-in-law, who had unintentionally witnessed the incident, intervened. She approached her son and slapped him twice, telling him he had no right to treat the mother of his future child that way. Afterwards, the woman convinced her daughter-in-law to stay, promising that it would not happen again. Lamu believed her and decided to give her husband another chance, a decision she would bitterly regret, as it was just the beginning of a real nightmare. From then on, Tong regularly became physically abusive, only to apologize afterward, crying and begging her not to leave him. Each time, Lamu wanted to believe he had come to his senses and would genuinely change, but the cycle repeated over and over. When she finally decided to leave her husband, he threatened to take their son away and do something terrible to her and her parents. Frightened, the young mother stayed, fearing he would carry out his threats. From then on, their child became his main tool for manipulation and blackmail.
Save up to 33% on select Walmart brand products. We got you.
Lamu told none of her relatives about the nightmare unfolding in her husband's home. Even her older sister, with whom she had been very close since childhood, suspected nothing. In 2012, after a long and severe illness, Lamu's mother passed away, which was a huge shock for her. Her elderly father and grandmother were left virtually helpless, and she found herself literally living between two homes, managing to maintain order, cook, and help with the household chores everywhere. Mountain Girl, a blog as an outlet. Meanwhile, Lamu continued to regularly climb the mountains for herbs to financially support both families. Only in the mountains, amidst the hard work, paradoxically, could she rest, be alone with her thoughts, and breathe freely without fear of her disgruntled husband coming home, causing a scene, and hitting her again. In 2017, the woman gave birth to a second son. Relations with her husband remained strained, and her mother-in-law had long stopped trying to intervene on her daughter-in-law's behalf, though she took on all the care of the grandchildren when Lamu went to work in the mountains. Around the same time, Lamu created her account on Douyin, Chinese TikTok, where she started posting short videos showcasing the local beauty, discussing various flowers and herbs, their medicinal properties, and how to use them. She quickly gained a large following who closely followed her, admired her work, and her extensive knowledge of traditional Chinese medicine. The budding blogger called herself Mountain Girl, and her followers dubbed her the Beauty from the Mountains. Engaging with her audience became the outlet Lamu desperately needed to keep from going insane. Sometimes, she quietly sang folk songs for her followers, and sometimes danced against the backdrop of mountain ridges. She always appeared happy, smiling genuinely, and never once complained to her audience about her difficult fate or mentioned the domestic violence she regularly endured. Divorce and remarriage. In 2019, Lamu's beloved grandmother passed away, and the blogger posted a video for the first time where she was crying, expressing her deep pain over losing a family member. Her numerous followers sincerely supported her, unlike her husband who, instead of showing sympathy, became furious and struck her face because she was sobbing. In January 2020, after enduring another severe incident of violence, Lamu finally decided to leave her tyrannical husband. She took her sons, moved back to her parents' home, and filed for divorce. Around the same time, Lamu recorded a new video stating that for the first time in a long while, she felt calm and confident. In the video, it was evident she tried to cover up a large bruise under her eye with concealer. However, she never disclosed to anyone the domestic abuse she had suffered for years. Regrettably, during the divorce proceedings, the court divided custody of the sons, leaving the younger child with the mother and the older with the father. This decision was a devastating blow for Lamu, and her now ex-husband unexpectedly changed tactics, romantically pursuing her again, proposing they start over and not break up the family. He swore he had realized his mistakes, wanted them and the boys to live together again, and promised to acknowledge all his past errors and never repeat them. For a couple of months, Tong put on the act of a repentant man. He gave flowers, created real celebrations for the family, tried to help his ex-wife around the house, and even joined her on mountain trips, which he had never done before. Lamu's heart softened, and she believed that he had genuinely changed. By the end of March, the couple remarried. Escape from the tyrant. As you might guess, the fairy tale ended as soon as Lamu returned to her husband's house. Tong reverted to being cruel, mean, and selfish, and within 2 weeks of remarrying, he brutally attacked his wife, nearly beating her to death. When Lamu interacted with her followers, he snatched the phone from her hands and hurled it against the wall, shattering it. Then he began to beat her with his fists and feet, giving her no chance to escape. Battered and barefoot, Lamu fled the house and immediately went to the police, seeking protection. But they only took her statement and advised her to try to resolve the family conflict on her own. After that, Lamu decided to hide from her husband in another village, to avoid endangering her relatives. Enraged, her husband was ready to end the life of his runaway wife, but did not know where to find her. He assumed she might have gone to her sister's house. He visited the sister's home and began yelling, demanding she tell him where Lamu was. The woman knew nothing about it and asked him to leave. Then Tong repeatedly struck her in the face with all his might. At that moment, her husband was at work, so there was no one to protect the unfortunate woman. She suffered a fractured cheekbone and eye socket, and her nose was broken. After the second victim also filed a police report, Tong was finally held accountable administratively, but he was not arrested. Nevertheless, Tong laid low while the second divorce proceedings were underway, not attempting to contact his wife. Unfortunately, this time around, the court, in dissolving the marriage, left both sons with the father, as the Lee family was wealthy, and money proved to be the deciding factor. The heartbroken mother was crushed with grief. Her close ones urged her to leave the village for a while, fearing the ex-husband would seek revenge and possibly do something dreadful. However, Lamu refused, wanting to be near her boys. 3 weeks after the second divorce, Lamu went to the mountains where she recorded a video of herself singing and dancing. Apparently, this was her way of trying to relieve stress, but her ex-husband interpreted it as her celebrating their separation, which blinded him with rage. Tragic assault broadcast live. On the evening of September 14th, 2020, around 8 o'clock, Lamu started a live stream to chat with her followers. She was dressed in a traditional Tibetan outfit, softly singing folk songs. She put a finger to her lips, whispering that they needed to be quiet because her father and visiting stepbrother were already asleep while she prepared breakfast treats for them. At that moment, a terrible noise erupted off camera, as if someone had kicked the door in. The blogger turned pale, frozen in fear. Her eyes wide with horror, she stared at the person entering, then suddenly jumped up, clearly trying to escape. The tripod with her smartphone fell camera down, but the broadcast continued. Viewers could not see what was happening in the room, but could hear everything. Heavy footsteps were heard, followed by the sound of a liquid splashing on the floor and walls. Lamu started screaming for help. Then her father's voice pleaded with the intruder to calm down and put down the knife. Lamu warned her family that the room was doused in gasoline and begged them to save themselves. A sinister silence fell for a few seconds. Then the click of a lighter followed by a piercing scream was heard. The broadcast cut off as the crackle of flames spreading through the room intensified. Followers were in disbelief, unwilling to accept that they had witnessed a tragedy, with some even speculating it was a cruel prank. Unfortunately, the worst had occurred. Tong decided to brutally exact revenge on his ex-wife for daring to leave him. He rode a motorcycle to Lamu's house, bringing along a canister of gasoline and a large knife. Through the windows, he saw his ex-wife in the kitchen on the ground floor and kicked the door leading to the room. Tong caught Lamu off guard. She barely understood what was happening before she tried to flee, but he prevented her from escaping. Tong doused Lamu with fuel and wounded her with the knife before setting the house on fire. At that moment, her father and brother ran outside, shouting for neighbors to help, but they did not understand what was happening or the seriousness of the situation. As the flames erupted, her relatives rushed back into the house, but the old wooden beams, burning like torches, collapsed, blocking the entrance. Miraculous rescue and battle for life. It took firefighters about 2 hours to extinguish the fire. When they entered, they found Lamu in the room, her skin charred black and in places literally melted and stuck to the floor. Incredibly, Lamu was still breathing, with a faint pulse detectable. She was immediately rushed to the hospital, where doctors were horrified by her condition. Over 90% of her body surface was burned, and her lungs had nearly cooked from the heated air and smoke, but she desperately continued to fight for her life. She was in a deep coma, and her condition was deemed critical. Nevertheless, the city's burn center was prepared to help. but the treatment cost was a staggering 1,000,000 yuan, a sum her family could not afford after losing everything in the fire. Then, Lamu's father decided to seek help from her followers. He wrote a letter explaining that her ex-husband had attacked her, attempting to end her life, but she had survived, and doctors held out a slim hope. However, the family simply didn't have the funds for her medical treatment. The letter was posted on her social account, along with a plea from her sister to all compassionate people to help Lamu, providing an account number for donations. The necessary funds for treatment were raised within an hour of the post, and people continued to
Patrick.
send money. Lamu was transferred to the burn center where she received the needed care. Her condition was stabilized, and at one point, it even seemed she might recover. However, tragically, after 2 weeks of fighting for her life, her heart could not endure any longer, and she passed away without regaining consciousness. She was only 30 years old. Trial and sentencing. Tong was arrested the day after committing this heinous act. At the trial, his mother desperately defended her son, who had inflicted such cruelty, claiming that he did it out of intense love for his ex-wife and stress from their divorce. Nevertheless, the verdict was severe and just. The court found Lee guilty of deliberate cruel deprivation of life and sentenced him to death, additionally mandating his family to compensate Lamu's relatives for the property loss due to the house fire. Tong attempted to appeal the verdict several times through appellate motions, but the decision remained unchanged. In July 2022, the sentence was carried out. Tong Lee was executed. That same year, 2 years after the tragic event that ended a young woman's life, her relatives rebuilt the house on the site of the burned one and were able to move back in. On the ground floor, her sister set up a small memorial altar with photographs of Lamu. In conclusion, the court left the orphaned boys in the custody of their paternal grandparents. The Lee family remained one of the wealthiest in the village, and the judges believed they could provide the children with better living conditions. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel. There are many shocking stories ahead of you.
Smallville Queens, I need y'all to see this.
Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Today we are going to visit India. India is the only country in the world where cultural and religious traditions have not been interrupted since ancient times, which is probably why it attracts tourists from all over the planet. But in our story, we will look at India like a coin that has a different image on each side. On April 20th, 2018 at dawn, 2 young men went fishing down the river toward a mangrove forest. They took a long boat ride downstream until they reached a remote and quiet place. One of them jumped into the water to tie up the boat, but his attention was distracted by a pungent, acrid odor that was very close by. They went ashore and followed the odor. Curiosity led them to a horrifying find. There was something that looked like a human body hanging on a tree branch and a skull lying nearby. The guys abandoned the boat and rushed to the nearest village to report the terrible find. A team of investigators, forensic experts, and police officers urgently arrived on the spot. The experts confirmed that the suspended body was indeed human. It was obvious that it had been hanging for a long time and had already begun to decompose. The flesh on the arms and legs had torn off. The skull was found nearby. Next to the body were packs of cigarettes, packaged drinking water, and a lighter, which probably belonged to the victim. An investigation was conducted at the scene the same morning. The evidence found was seized, and the remains were sent for examination. The modest remnants of clothing that could be identified on the victim were identified. Liga Skroman, a 33-year-old hiker, was the victim of an accident. But who is Liga Skroman, and what happened to her on the riverbank? Liga Skroman was born in Latvia in 1986. She grew up in a large and friendly family, had an older brother and a younger sister. The sisters were very friendly, and from childhood shared all joys and hardships with each other. Growing up, Liga moved to Ireland, but always maintained close relations with her family. It was in Ireland that she met Andrew Jordan. It was not love at first sight, as the modest Liga had difficulty in communicating with new people. But after 5 years, Liga and Andrew turned into a married couple who made great plans for the future. And despite the fact that Liga worked in a hotel and led a modest lifestyle, she dreamed of opening her own center of yogic retreats in Portugal. Andrew supported his beloved's idea, and together they saved money for 4 years to fulfill their dream. But fate had other plans. In early 2018, Liga was experiencing the effects of an aggravated skin disease that was causing physical and mental discomfort. To help her sister overcome this ailment and restore her emotional state, her sister Ilza invited Liga on a trip. So in February 2018, Liga and Ilza traveled to Trivandrum, the capital of Kerala, so that Liga could receive Ayurvedic treatment for depression. Kovalam is the premier Ayurvedic resort of Kerala in India. Kovalam, which means grove of coconut palms in Hindi, is a small village offering everything you need for a comfortable and complete rest and treatment. Ayurveda is the oldest system of medical knowledge, which originated more than 5,000 years ago. Ayurveda is based on the universal laws of nature, on the unity of all things in this world. Ayurvedic programs help a person to restore balance and harmony in the body. Panchakarma is the best Ayurvedic program for modern man in Kerala. Panchakarma helps to reboot the body effectively. Most of those who have undergone the Panchakarma course in Kerala repeat it annually, and it is not without reason, as regular Panchakarma not only allows us to get rid of extra pounds, but also adds a couple of decades of healthy life. Since 1985, Ayurveda has been recognized by the World Health Organization as the most effective system of alternative medicine in the world. Let us emphasize that all the promised benefits of Ayurveda are only an alternative, not a panacea for healthy longevity. The 33-year-old Liga and her sister came to Kerala in search of spiritual enlightenment, hoping to be cured of depression in one of the Ayurveda centers. Their treatment tour was scheduled for 6 weeks and included yoga classes, meditation, therapeutic herbal drinks, and nutritional and massage recommendations. The sisters were treated together at an Ayurvedic clinic at Kovalam in Kerala and have already completed their course. On the morning of March 14th, Liga refused to go to yoga class with her sister, explaining that she had a headache. When Ilza returned to her room, Liga was not there. With the help of the hotel staff, Ilza was able to find out that her sister left the hotel around 11:30 a.m. wearing leggings and a yoga t-shirt, hired an auto rickshaw, and went to Kovalam Beach for a walk. The beaches around Kovalam are popular destinations for both domestic and international travelers. The sandy beaches of Kovalam are always crowded. However, Liga could not be found there. Ilza wandered the beach until late at night showing her sister's picture, but never heard the long-awaited response that someone had seen her. This was actually strange, as Liga was a tall white girl who definitely stood out, and if she was actually on the beach, someone should have seen her. After searching unsuccessfully, Ilza went to the police station to report her sister missing. However, the Indian police officers did not show any sympathy for the missing foreign tourist, but on the contrary, complacently asserted that they would surely find the girl who had strayed, or she would surely return the next day. They were not even deterred by the fact that Liga, according to her sister, had psychological problems and could be an easy target for criminals. The Potencod police registered a case, but the investigation started coldly, or rather it is more correct to say did not start at all. Ilze Skromani had traveled extensively in Kerala. She had been to Kollam, Varkala, and finally came to Kovalam. She considered herself a very experienced traveler in India, and this time she took her sister with her to show her the India she loved so much. But the trip turned tragic. After a few days of inaction by the Indian police, Ilza started searching on her own. She enlisted the help of friends and also reported Liga missing to her husband. Andrew flew urgently to India. The police investigation intensified after the missing person's husband, Andrew, Jordan, and Ilza contacted the local press and started an online campaign to find her. Ilza also reached out via Twitter to India's foreign minister, Sushma Swaraj. "Please help! My sister, a Latvian citizen, has been missing for 8 days. We are very worried," she wrote. The desperate sister announced a reward of 100,000 rupees to anyone who could help find Liga or provide any information about her movements that day. Ilza and her friend Alexa, who had also traveled to India after hearing about Liga's disappearance, put up posters in the Kovalam beach area where Liga was last seen. Together, they put up flyers and distributed them to people.
Put your harness on.
Numerous locals took an active part in the search for the missing tourist. The important fact remained that Liga suffered from depression and had a hard time interacting with strangers. On the day of her disappearance, she hired an auto rickshaw to reach the beach and was never seen again. She had about 1,000 rupees with her, but no passport, so she could not leave the country. Ashok Kumar, head of the local police station, said that the police had no leads in the case. The police kept saying that the tourist had gone on a bender or eloped and would soon return on her own. However, regular, persistent requests for help from Ilza and Andrew forced the police to search for Liga. The search operation was conducted in the Kovalam beach area where Liga Skramani was last seen. Police assumed that she had drowned just as the unidentified body of a woman was found washed ashore at Kulachal in Kanyakumari district. Investigators examined the body along with the missing woman's sister, but the latter did not identify it as her sister. The version of drowning was not confirmed, and the search for Liga continued. Andrew, on the other hand, was convinced that his wife had been kidnapped by local gangs for the purpose of selling her. He tried to infiltrate these gangs to get more information, but was exposed and warned that repeated contact with the gangs would result in him having to leave the country. A month after Liga went missing, there are still no leads to help find the girl. Ilza continued to look for her sister. She visited Kovalam beach every day and watched people. On one such day, she spotted a boat and she had a theory. The only way to leave or leave the beach unnoticed was the boat. On April 17th, 2018, after a forced hiatus, Andrew returned to India to continue his search. Ilza and Andrew entered a new struggle to find the Skramane League, but the body was still not found. The search was complicated by the fact that Liga Skramane was a tourist and a citizen of another country. The Latvian Foreign Ministry said the embassy was in constant contact with Liga's relatives and was also working closely with the Indian police. The Latvian embassy also appealed to the Indian Foreign Ministry with a request for special support in the search for Liga, as well as the honorary consul of Latvia in India, whose consular district includes the region where Liga disappeared. At the request of the Kerala state government, the Indian Navy and Air Force will search for missing Latvian citizen Liga Skramane. The search operation involved an An-32 transport plane, Gemini inflatable boats, underwater sonar, and 5 deep-sea divers, but even this search operation did not bring the desired result, and Liga was still not found. The search continued. By this time, all local residents knew about the missing tourist from Latvia. They supported and sympathized with Andrew and Ilza. On April 20th, 2018, Ilza's phone received the longest-awaited yet most horrific call of her life. A body had been found in the mangrove jungle. She and Andrew drove to the designated spot where the police were waiting for them for the boat crossing. Ilza's heart was pounding like never before. She felt that for the moment, she would have to swim the path that the League had traveled to its demise. On the spot, horror overwhelmed her. Ilza saw her sister's clothes. The shirt and leggings on the body were recognized by Ilza, but the jacket and shoes did not belong to Liga. It remained unclear how, with whom, and why Liga had gotten to a place that could only be accessed by going through Panatura from Samudra Beach. 2 women confirmed that they had witnessed Liga traveling alone into the mangrove forest. But why would a girl who is being treated for depression and is already alone, take a boat to a remote place in the forest. The body was shifted to the Medical College Hospital, where it underwent an autopsy, which was captured on video camera. The police said they could not confirm the identity of the body until DNA analysis was completed. According to the city police commissioner, the body was badly mutilated, with a head lying nearby. Police have tentatively identified the dead woman as missing tourist Liga Scromain. In favor of the investigators' conclusions is also the fact that the victim was identified by Liga's relatives by her hair and clothes. One of the versions of rescue services in India was poisoning. There are poisonous pong trees in the mangrove forest, and she could have accidentally or intentionally eaten their fruit and poisoned herself. Between 1989 and 1999, more than 500 people died from poisoning by its fruits in Kerala alone. It looked like another nonsense, because the person was hanging upside down, but there was no head. It is obvious that if Liga was poisoned, her body would have been in a completely different position, and the head would have been in place. The Indian authorities were talking utter nonsense. Based on the information about Liga's complex psychological problem, the investigators also assumed the version that Liga had voluntarily left her life. Ilza feared that the police would try to pass off her sister's murder as a voluntary departure from life. Although a rope had been found at the scene, and it could be concluded that the hiker had hanged herself, Ilsa demanded a separate explanation for the missing head. "Don't tell me it's lost," Ilsa said sarcastically in yet another appeal on the internet. Breathlessly, Ilsa and the anxious public waited for the results of the forensic tests. The forensic results were overwhelming. The forensic report stated that there were areas of blood pooling in part of Liga Scromain's brain, as well as bruising in the neck area. The autopsy revealed that the woman had been strangled by several people. She was killed in an attempted violent attack. There were external injuries on the body, probably sustained during the struggle. The fact of violence could not be confirmed as the body was in the decomposition stage. There were characteristic injuries on the cartilage in her throat, which indicated that someone had squeezed her throat with force. The trauma was severe enough to be fatal. According to forensic experts, there were blood clots in her brain which confirmed strangulation. They also noted that there were bruises on her neck and legs. A total of 9 wounds were recorded on Liga Scromain's body. In view of the above, the police no longer considered the version of voluntary death. According to the autopsy, it was determined that Liga was murdered. Liga died after resisting or struggling. Ilza breathed a sigh of relief and hoped that the police would soon find her sister's killers. But there were complications as well. As part of the investigation, the police began checking out local drug dealers and card players. In addition, during interviews with local residents, 2 women said that they saw Liga walking alone to the place where her body was later found, but the police said they did not fully trust their words. Meanwhile, Liga's relatives have accused Indian police of incompetence, claiming that if the girl had been searched for immediately, the tragedy could have been avoided. The 33-year-old Latvian tourist is believed to have been grabbed from a nearby beach and transported by boat before being strangled. A special team of investigators has begun looking for those responsible for the crime. About 40 suspects were interviewed. However, arrests were planned to be made a few days later after the law enforcers had enough evidence. The Indian police conducted an investigation that led to the arrest of 2 men who were eventually accused of killing Liga Scromain. Police revealed that Liga Scromain was lured by 2 men who then abused her before dismembering her body. The alleged assailants, who are now in custody, are local dealers in illegal substances. The suspects fully confessed under torture. Both the accused were pimps and were also dealing in illegal substances. Police said the autopsy did not reveal much evidence because Liga's body was badly decomposed. Andrew Jordan filed a petition in Superior Court, calling for a review of the felony murder case. He believed that more people were involved in the woman's murder. In the petition, he pointed out that both defendants later recanted their pleas of guilty to the crime. According to Jordan, The men may have confessed because they were tortured, which, as it turns out, is a common practice in India. However, the Supreme Court of India denied the murdered woman's common-law husband, Liga Scroman, a review of the case. Due to lack of direct evidence, the trial was postponed for 2 months. But Andrew was outraged by this attitude of the authorities. He had earlier accused the Kerala authorities and police of incompetence and attempts to cover up Leia's murder, so as not to scare away tourists. Both the suspects' lawyers asked for and got a postponement. By law, they have the right to postpone the case once without giving any reason. The more they postponed, the more he was convinced the case was unclean. However, both suspects were in custody. Investigation revealed that 32-year-old Umesh and 28-year-old Udayakumar offered Liga Scromani weed, and when she was drugged, they used it and then strangled and decapitated her. It is noted that the 2 men apprehended for the murder of Liga Scromana and had previously committed similar crimes on numerous occasions. Both of them worked for a food delivery company in the Kerala capital and earned money as illegal tour guides in their spare time. Umesh and Udayan have been charged with destruction of evidence, murder, poisoning, kidnapping, and rape. The place where Liga's corpse was found and had earlier served as a pleasure ground for Umesh. He used to take men there. 13 criminal cases have been filed against him, including 6 for sexual assault and 1 for attempted murder. Several of Umesh's victims have testified against him. Liga Scroman, along with both men, were seen in the area by several people. They were initially silent, but confessed to everything after the body was found. The detainees confessed to police that they committed the murder while attempting violence. They were apprehended, but had previously claimed that they had only seen Liga Scroman in Kovalam. The men pleaded guilty after repeated interrogations. On December 6, 2022, the court finally sentenced both men to life in prison. The court also recognized that the criminals must pay compensation to Liga Scroman's sister, Ilsa, 165,000 rupees each. We would like to note that there has been a whole series of such crimes in this country recently. Young girls are regularly subjected to violence. The problem of crime in India is very acute. Due to the huge number of sexual acts against minors, the government has introduced the death penalty. It is also worth noting that if the relatives, and primarily Liga's sister, had not been persistent, had they not involved the press by organizing a press conference and an influential MP, it is obvious that the local police would hardly have seriously investigated the case. For at first a theory was put forward, that the League had allegedly passed away voluntarily. And as it now turns out, this is not the first incident in this very place where Liga was found. After this story, I would like to warn once again all women who are frivolous about the dangers of traveling alone in India. Do not seek spiritual enlightenment in distant, dangerous, and uncharted countries. Take care of yourself. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel. There are many... Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Sometimes exes come back, but the scary thing is not their return, but the fact that they may come back with weapons in their hands. On January 18th, 2014, a young couple holding hands walked out of church. It was a bright day they had been looking forward to. The many people attending the service were still inside the church. The man and woman hurried to their parked car to grab boxes of toys and gifts for their young daughter, who was waiting for them at the church. But the subdued January silence was struck by loud pops. One, a second, a third. The young men fell like dolls whose batteries had died. Scarlet pools of blood filled the asphalt around them. A few minutes later, the emergency services received a call that 2 people had been killed in a parking lot near the church. People ran out at the noise. General outrage and shock grew in the roll call of the crowd. A little girl who had not received her presents cried from the panic that gripped her. She, like other parishioners, heard the sounds of gunshots, but did not see the full horror of what had happened. Police arrived at the scene and taped off the area and examined the scene of the attack. When emergency ambulance doctors arrived, they were left with only 2 deaths. The victims were young married couple Nathan and Crystal Maddox. We're going to start at the beginning together. We'll take a look at the lives of our heroes and go into detail about the situation they found themselves in, and also be sure to discuss whether such a tragedy end could have been avoided. When lies, betrayal, greed, fear, and darkness become an integral part of someone's mindset, it causes them to commit horrible crimes that no one could ever imagine. In fact, an entire family can be drawn into such crimes, causing many worlds to fall apart. Our story features the brutal double murder of Nathan and Crystal Maddox. So now, if you are interested in learning all the minute details of this case, let's get started. The events of this family send us to Texas, the small town of Colmesnail in Tyler County. A town so small that with a population of 563 people, people know each other by sight. And some of them have started families and become relatives. Nathan and Kristen's relationship was very fast-paced. Young people lived on neighboring streets, lived together the first love and the first kiss. The girl's parents did not approve of her choice, and in every possible way prevented their relationship. Kristen could not cross her beloved parents and refused her love. But fate presented a surprise, and Kristen learned that she was expecting a child. Parents had nothing left but to accept the situation and let the lovers get married, because it is unworthy to look in front of people as a single mother. Nathan and Kristen got married in Texas, and soon after the wedding they got a house and had their first child, a daughter, Madison. But family life turned out to be far from the fairy tale story from the movie. Nathan had to work hard to support his family. Having a house and maintaining it doesn't come cheap, so Nathan was forced to take a job away from home. He traveled to Montana. A young husband and father, he tried to visit Kristen and Madison as often as possible. He often sent money home to them, and for the most part, Nathan was pretty sure he had a happy family waiting for him at home. And that seemed to be the case. He loved Kristen. He loved Madison. He thought they had the perfect little family, until one day he came home from Montana. When he walked in the door, he noticed right away that the house was empty. Most of the things inside the house were gone, and there was a note on the kitchen table. In just a few lines, Kristen cruelly informed him that she was leaving Nathan. The reason seemed strange. The woman wrote that she didn't know where her husband was missing, who he was with, or when he would return. She wrote that she was unhappy, but that was a lie, because Kristen knew perfectly well that Nathan was in Montana for work. He called all the time, asking how she and her daughter were doing, what they were doing. He sent them money on a regular basis. The worst part of this episode was that she took Madison with her, and Nathan is now banned from seeing his daughter. Kristen did a very mean thing. She went to the police station and used false information to gain full custody of her daughter, indicating that her father was not providing for or interested in the child. Nathan knew that the ex-wife and daughter had returned to his parents' home. He repeatedly tried to see little Madison, but the Westfall family was adamant. They were jubilant that they had managed to get rid of an unloved son-in-law. Time passed. Nathan returned to his hometown to be closer to his daughter. He did not give up trying to see her, but he knew that it was necessary, with the help of a lawyer, to obtain official custody of his daughter and to achieve legal meetings. During this difficult period, he meets Crystal. They'd known each other since childhood. They went to school together. When they were teenagers, their paths diverged. Crystal went to the big city. She dreamed of graduating from university, but in her last year she got married, and instead of a successful career, she got a happy family life, in which 4 children were born. But unfortunately, after a while, the relationship between the spouses went downhill, and they decided to divorce. In 2011, Crystal and her children returned to her hometown. 2 longtime friends met each other at the most necessary moment for each of them. Nathan was enamored with Crystal's children. From the way their mother interacted with the children, from Crystal's inexhaustible energy that lit up everything around her, like a fairy with her optimism. In 2013, Nathan and Crystal were married. Nathan worked at the Lakin Industries warehouse, while Crystal started a small clothing business, opened a children's clothing boutique under her own name, and handmade jewelry. The family's business was doing very well, and it became feasible for them to hire a good lawyer to get a chance to see Nathan's daughter from her first marriage and try to get custody. Madison was thrilled with her daddy's new wife and the siblings she had. The girl was completely happy in her father's home. This made Lita and Paula Westfall, Kristen's parents, completely resentful. They were very afraid of losing their only granddaughter. Back in 2012, Kristen Westfall, with the support of her parents, applied to the court for full custody of her daughter. The custody battle dragged on for a long 2 years. The Westfall family had hoped to get full custody very quickly, but Crystal's arrival in Nathan's life changed the whole picture of his existence. A full family, a home, and a good job made a strong case in court, and Nathan was granted visitation rights with his daughter. He was very happy and prepared to take his daughter away for the day. In October 2013, the judge allowed Nathan and Crystal to have supervised visits with Madison. On January 18, 2014, Nathan and Crystal arrived at Mount Carmel Church for Sunday service, after which they wanted to go for a walk with 6-year-old Madi. They left the church a little earlier than the rest of the congregation to retrieve pre-prepared gifts for Madison from their car. Just a few steps later, 3 loud pops
497, 498
were heard. Nathan and Crystal were killed by fatal gunshot wounds to the head. The small town was shocked by the gratuitous execution of a young married couple. But as it later turned out, there was a reason after all. But why take 2 people's lives, so brazenly and so brutally? The police arrived on the scene and meticulously investigated the scene. Nathan and Crystal had been shot in the head with a .30 caliber rifle, which was found at the scene along with .30 caliber shell casings. An autopsy later revealed that Nathan had also been shot in the thigh with a 20-gauge shotgun, leading investigators to assume that there were 2 shooters, as it is obvious that one person cannot shoot and reload at the same time. Investigators conducted a series of interviews with witnesses to gather information about the Maddox family and build their picture of what happened. They interviewed parishioners, acquaintances, and relatives of the slain family. But what surprised them most was the reaction of Nathan's ex-wife's family. Kristen and her parents were called to testify at the police station, as were the other witnesses. The further behavior of this family caused great surprise to the investigators. The Westfalls played up the tragedy too much, trying to hide their joy at the deaths that had occurred. Paul Westfall was so shocked that he went into a seizure, so much so that he couldn't believe the news of Nathan's death, that he had to call emergency services. A grown man who had spent years trying to rid himself of Nathan's presence in his daughter's life was so upset that he had a seizure. Kristen was the first person interviewed, and her interview was a little creepy. She was the only one of the family to maintain a very calm and natural demeanor, despite the fact that she and Nathan had been together for a long time and had a child together. Kristen continued to give some really weird details about him, trying to bring out only the negative aspects of her ex-husband. She reported that she knew who killed him. In Montana, Nathan was listed in dangerous motorcycle gangs. One day, one of the gang members showed up at Nathan's mother's house and threatened to kill him. This story checked out, but it remained an empty threat because of an accidentally broken motorcycle, and the gang itself turned out to be a common exaggeration to confuse the investigation. Also, as an alibi, Kristen said that on the day of the crime, she was at the grocery store with her father Paul, a couple miles from the church, after which they both went home. Surveillance footage at 10:57 a.m. confirmed their presence at the grocery store. Paul Westfall told the exact same story, but Paul was a hunter and had a firearm in his arsenal, so his hands were tested for traces of gunpowder, but the result was negative. But until now, his reaction to the death of Nathan, whom he sincerely hated and never hid it, seemed to the investigators very strange and played. It left a sliver of doubt in his sincerity. Interviews with loved ones, over a short period of time, helped investigators discover that Nathan Maddox was involved in a custody battle over his daughter with his ex-wife Kristen Westfall and her family. After a long and bitter dispute in court, he was close to retaining custody, something that none of the Westfall family members strongly wanted. Such a desperate battle between the parties may well have been cause for reprisal. But the police had no concrete evidence to arrest any member of the Westfall family. The family consisted of 4 people, and 2 people were the shooters. Investigators had yet to be convinced of their story and figure out which family member pulled the trigger, taking the lives of 2 people, or whether a hired killer did it. The investigators took a different path and decided to act through the main protagonist of the controversy, little Madison Maddox. After all, her safety was at stake. She continued to be with a family that could pose a threat to her. Police officers, along with Child Protective Services, CPS, came to remove the girl from the home, but faced a wave of protest and rage. The behavior of the older Westfall family entailed a search of the home. What the police later found in the house shocked them. A gun was stored on a shelf in an easily accessible place in the room. The culmination of the search was the illegal drugs scattered around the house. It turns out that in 2013, Kristen Westfall was charged and arrested for possession of a controlled substance. The arrests were repeated, which clearly indicated that Kristen couldn't be a good mother to Madison. When Kristen went to jail in early 2013, her parents were granted temporary custody of their daughter and would not allow Nathan to see her while their granddaughter was in their custody. However, despite Child Protective Services prohibitions, Kristen continued to live in the house with her young daughter in the same room and slept in the same bed with her. Even in 2014, with the injunctions in place, Kristen continued to live with the rest of her family and had daily access to her daughter, despite being ordered by the court to move. After a search of the Westfalls' home, where a used syringe with residue of illegal substances was found on a dresser and a gun on the nightstand next to Kristen's bed, little Madison was taken into temporary custody, and additional evidence found led to the Westfalls' arrest. State authorities wanted the girl placed in foster care and said they found supplies for illegal drugs in the Westfalls' home, as well as a gun on a nightstand within easy reach of the girl. Child Protective Services was involved in the Madison Maddox custody case. In March 2014, less than 2 months after the tragic murder outside the church, authorities made 4 arrests. Kristen Westfall, 29, her younger brother Cameron, and her parents Paul and Lita Westfall were arrested. There was no direct evidence of their guilt in the Maddox murder. Cross-examinations didn't produce the desired result either. So the police had to go for a little trickery to put the squeeze on the most vulnerable member of the Westfall family. That was 18-year-old Cameron. He was told that if proven guilty, all members of his family would face life imprisonment, and the direct killers would face the death penalty. Cameron was young and kind-hearted. He was very scared and quickly agreed to cooperate with the investigation, revealing all the details of what happened. The crime against the young couple, Maddox, turned out to be carefully pre-planned by the family gang in order to permanently exclude Nathan from the role of father. Shortly after the shooting episode, it was revealed that Nathan and his ex-wife Kristen, with the help of her family, had been secured a nasty custody disagreement over their 5-year-old daughter Madison. The long and costly legal battle was to end well for Nathan. The Westfalls were concerned and carefully plotted a scheme to remove him from Madison's life. Nathan wanted to take care of his daughter alone, but the Westfalls were not interested in letting her go even to see her father. let alone give him the girl permanently. The Westfalls were very hurt by the fact that the former son-in-law had settled down in life and was living a good life. Thus, when the judge allowed him multiple visitations, it became obvious that he could win the trial, which led to Kristen coming up with an original idea to get rid of him once and for all. At first, Kristen tried to find someone to kill her ex-husband. When that failed, she and her father decided to do it themselves. On Sunday afternoon, the family often attended church, and the day of January 18th was no exception. Lita Westfall and little Madison drove to the appointed time for the service. Afterward, she had to hand the girl over to her father. In the meantime, Kristen and Paul went to a distant store and posed as customers to get on CCTV cameras to create a solid alibi. But they miscalculated the timing. Each family member had their own responsible role to play. For the entire interval, they communicated by text message, updating each other on the Maddox's movements. Letha, who had attended the service, informed Paul as Nathan and Crystal prepared to leave the church. She also called 911 immediately after the murder. Cameron took an active role in concealing the evidence. He discarded the gun used after his sister and father shot the newlyweds in the head near a remote church. He drove to a lake where he discarded the bag of weapons. Cameron soon agreed to cooperate with authorities and revealed that Kristen originally came up with the idea and the family went along. He also pointed out to investigators the location where he had discarded the murder weapons. Divers later retrieved said items, which confirmed Cameron's words. The police detained 29-year-old Kristen, her brother Cameron and her parents, Paul and Letha Westfall, and charged them with organized crime. Thus, Kristen and Paul pulled the trigger, with Cameron and Lita acting as willing accomplices. Given that Lita was at the church at the time of the incident, it was obvious that she was not responsible for the shots that killed Nathan and Crystal Maddox. However, phone records showed that she was responsible for informing her daughter and spouse of the couple's whereabouts, and that she informed them as they left the church. While Kristen and Paul were the ones who fired the bullets, Lita and her son Cameron participated in the crime intentionally. The trial was very loud and lengthy. Each member of the Westfall family was tried separately. Paul Westfall continued to act out his seizures, so he was found mentally unfit and remained in a state psychiatric hospital for a while for evaluation. In May 2014, a judge found Paul incompetent, but that verdict was overturned 4 months later. With Paul and Letha facing the death penalty for the murders of Nathan and Crystal Maddox, they had little choice but to agree to a mutually beneficial plea bargain with the DA's office. To avoid the death penalty, Paul was forced to take a plea bargain with the prosecution. He pleaded guilty to the charges and thus was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Lita also took a plea bargain with the investigation. Instead of going to trial, she pleaded guilty to participating in organized criminal activity. Lita will not be eligible for parole until 2046. She is currently incarcerated at Mountain View Prison in Gatesville, but will be eligible for parole in 2044. At the time of sentencing, Lita Westfall was 54 years old, so she will likely die in prison. Kristen is the third member of the Westfall family to stand trial in this case. Throughout the entire court hearing, Kristen pleaded not guilty. To all the accusations against her, she replied that her whole family was crazy. She was the only one who was sincere about it. When her entire family, Letha, Paul, and Cameron, came to the trial and testified against her, she couldn't say anything to their faces. In August 2016, the final trial and sentencing for Kristen Westfall began. The motive for killing Nathan and Crystal Maddox was custody of Madison Maddox. Kristen adamantly did not want Nathan to see Maddie whenever he wanted. She did not want to give him the privilege because she could not see him happy. She wanted to control her daughter and father's communication herself, and through the child, she wanted to control everything he did and everything he felt. The trial took over a week. In the end, with overwhelming evidence against her, it took the jury 8 hours to find her guilty of capital murder. In a Brazos County courtroom, attorneys and the judge considered final motions for the woman. Kristen was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole nearly 9 months before her father pleaded guilty and received an identical sentence in May 2017. Kristen Westfall is currently incarcerated at the William Hobby Women's Prison in Falls County, Texas. While Paul, Lita, and Kristen Westfall were ultimately charged with 2 counts of murder, officials only charged the youngest member of the family, Cameron, with 2 counts of tampering with or fabricating physical evidence. Cameron Westfall pleaded guilty to 2 counts of third-degree tampering with evidence. The judge deferred sentencing contingent upon Cameron Westfall testifying against his family. He faced up to 10 years in prison on each charge. It was reported that he had nothing to do with the actual shooting, and that his mother was also not involved because she was at the church when the crime occurred. However, phone records show that she texted her husband and daughter as the Maddoxes were preparing to go home. Currently, Cameron is incarcerated at the Huntsville Correctional Facility in Huntsville, Texas, where he is expected to remain until his expected release date in 2025. Cameron was very indifferent to the crime, and he really had nothing to do with the crime, as he claims Paul allegedly just happened to come home, handed Cameron 2 guns and told him to throw them away. But the investigation didn't rule out that Cameron knew a little more than he was saying. After all, Cameron lived in the house with his family, and he simply couldn't have not heard about Kristen and Paul's plans to kill the Maddox family. And if he was an unspoken witness to the plot, after all, why didn't he go to the police or even try to stop his family? So ended the story of a double murder at the house of God in a close-knit community that shook the entire state of Texas to its core. Recall that on January 18, 2014, Nathan and Crystal Maddox were shot and killed right outside the gates of Mount Carmel Baptist Church near Colmsneil. After waiting for a legal and supervised visitation with his 5-year-old daughter from a previous marriage, it soon became clear that the girl's biological mother, Kristen Westfall, and her entire family, brother Cameron and parents Lloyd Paul and Lita Westfall, were behind the crime. This case was complicated. The community demanded justice. Lloyd Paul, Lita, and Cameron Westfall made a deal with the investigation. After agreeing to testify against his sister, Cameron took a plea bargain. He pleaded guilty to a lesser charge, 2 counts of tampering with or fabricating physical evidence. In 2016, a judge sentenced Cameron to 10 years in prison, and his mother received a life sentence. The following year, a judge sentenced Lloyd Paul to life in prison. He avoided the death penalty by pleading guilty to first-degree murder. Under the plea agreement, he would not be able to appeal the sentence. The crime family's protagonist, Kristen Westfall, received a life sentence without parole. In a fateful decision by her mother, Madison Maddox lost her father and will likely never see the grandparents who cared for her and perhaps even loved her. Time after the Westfall family was sentenced, the legal battle for custody of Madison Maddox continues. Nathan Maddox's father, Jim, has since filed a petition to become the primary guardian of his granddaughter. A huge number of people die in custody battles every year. Most importantly, the children are not made happier, but orphans with psychological problems. All the people in the town were devout, went to church, and they're also easily killed people. Covering themselves with concern for the girl, the older generation of Westfall fulfilled the wish of their daughter and helped to commit this terrible crime. What were they hoping for? Based on the story, Nathan was not a bad or mean person. He loved his own daughter and strove to be a good father to her. Obviously, in addition to the custody battle, the hatred associated with the fact that the girl's father had created a new family was able to pick up his mind and started a new life without crime comes first, and was perfectly happy with the new woman, having something he didn't have in his past relationship with Kristen. That's what was causing all the negativity from the ex-wife, and she was able to turn her entire family against him. If it was just about custody, they wouldn't have killed Nathan's new woman, and that's probably true. After all, the Madison custody dispute started before Nathan and Crystal's relationship. There is certainly only one loser in the history of the Westfall versus Maddox fight. Of course, it's Madison. I'd like to believe that when she grows up, she won't remember the wild selfishness with which adults tried to take advantage of her by saying words about love. After all, if the family had loved the child, they would have tried to build a normal relationship for her sake. But they were only acting to please their own egos. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel. There are many shocking stories ahead of you.
He passes the puck, line to the goal.
We are professional tornado wranglers.
If you feel it, chase it!
Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Australia is a continent known for its natural beauty. Sandy beaches, deserts, and in some places, bushland. At the same time, Australia is one of the most highly urbanized countries with megacities such as Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Perth. Snapper Point is an Australian conservation area located near Fraser Park Beach, near Catherine Hill Bay, New South Wales. The area around Cape Snapper Point attracts intrepid tourists who climb it in search of unforgettable shots, as it is made up entirely of steep, uneven volcanic rocks. On April 24, 2016, at 10:30 a.m., a group of hikers walking at the foot of the promontory noticed something large floating on the surface of the water. They reported the find to law enforcement. The police arrived on the scene and removed an unknown package. Upon examining the find on shore, they discovered the body of an unknown woman with multiple injuries, indicating that the victim had been brutally assaulted. She was not identified, but news accounts described her as an Asian female between 20 and 35 years old of average height. 5 years earlier, a major airport in northern Sichuan province in the People's Republic of China saw off 20-year-old Meng Mei Leng in a torrential downpour. The girl tearfully said goodbye to her beloved mother. After the death of her father in 2008, her mom became the closest person to her. She flew from her native China to faraway Australia, where she had dreamed of studying since her childhood. 11 hours later, the plane landed in Sydney. It was the first time Meng Mei had made such a long journey alone, but she was in a hurry to achieve her dream, so she easily overcame any difficulties. She was met at the airport by her own aunt and her son, who was only 2 years younger than Meng Mei. The oldest and most populous state in Australia is New South Wales. 1 in 3 Australians live in its territory. It was here that Meng Mei's early years were spent after moving here. Since coming to Australia, Meng Mei has lived happily with her 48-year-old aunt, her young husband, Derek Barrett, and with her cousin in their camping house. The girl had a private room where she spent almost all of her free time. Meng Mei loved to read and draw, so she would spend hours in her room pursuing her favorite hobbies. For the convenience of living in another country, Meng Mei changed her name to Michelle. Michelle Leng enrolled at the University of Technology in Sydney, where she successfully studied economics and hospitality management. Michelle was very intelligent and motivated. She was not afraid of anything new and easily made new acquaintances. Like many girls of her age, she often posted photos in social networks, on which she drank cocktails with friends, as well as shots with extreme outings to dangerous places. By nature, Michelle was an adventurous person who could easily travel to Hobart for a vacation and regularly took day trips around New South Wales. In recent weeks, she posted videos from West Head Lookout near Sydney Harbour, photos from Resolute Beach, north of the city, from Ku-ring-gai Chase National Park, and from Very Beach on the south coast. On June 13, 2013, she visited Snapper Point, where she fearlessly photographed herself on the edge of a cliff and posted this prophetic photo to her Instagram account. Michelle excelled in her studies, made new friends, and found a part-time job. Wishing to arrange her personal life, Michelle regularly communicated with guys on dating sites and went on trial dates. The girl had an active and busy life, where she attended classes during the day and then hurried to work. On her weekends, she was sure to meet friends and visit unusual places. On April 21st, 2016, Michelle met up with a friend at the mall. They had lunch together, did some shopping, then Michelle boarded a train at the train station. She got off at Campsie Station around 4:30 in the afternoon and was never seen again. 2 days later, Derek went to the train station to meet his wife, who had returned from a business trip. Aunt Michelle asked Derek about his niece, and he said he had not seen her in 2 days. Derek Barrett had been unemployed for a long time, so he often stayed up late at the computer and woke up only in the afternoon, so it was obvious that he might not have seen Michelle. But the situation was such that nobody had seen Michelle since April 22nd, and her phone was switched off. Having called all Michelle's acquaintances and friends, the aunt became even more worried. She inspected the girl's room, but it was in complete order as always. After looking through the girl's laptop, the family concluded that Michelle had not returned from her date, and perhaps something had happened to her. Michelle's absence was quite unusual, as she was in daily contact with friends and family members living in China and Australia. The next day, Michelle's aunt and her husband Derek went to the police station and filed a missing persons report. They also reported Michelle Leng's disappearance to the Chinese embassy. On April 24th, 2016, the body of an unidentified woman wrapped in a plastic bag was found by a group of tourists at Snapper Point. As Michelle's relatives in China and Australia searched for her, local news channels carried a report of the woman's body being found. A compiled sketch of the victim aired, left no doubt. Michelle had been found. It took the police 3 days to identify her after they made a sketch of her. From that point on, Michelle Leng was officially listed as a missing person. An investigation was launched. After interviewing close relatives living with Michelle, the first theory was that Michelle had been attacked by an unknown guy who Michelle had planned to meet that day. On CCTV cameras restored the movements of the girl on the day of disappearance. But on surveillance cameras and on a short train journey, Michelle was alone. According to her friends, she had no plans to meet anyone that day and was in a hurry to get home. Reviewing social networks and correspondence of the girl did not confirm the presence of a young man with whom she could meet. The version about a secret stranger who could have committed the crime was not confirmed. The results of forensic examination were expected. The autopsy confirmed that Michelle's body had multiple injuries. She had most likely tried to fight off her attacker and suffered multiple stab wounds. Police Chief Inspector Gary Jubelin said the interpretation of the situation is that Michelle was brutally assaulted before her death, but she was spotted on her way home and did not go out anywhere else. So who could have attacked her with such atrocity? The inspector also noted that most likely the perpetrator had deliberately chosen a very lonely area of such a beautiful place. After all, the body was found in an area frequented by tourists and fishermen, but the place was somewhat isolated. Forensics found that Michelle Leng's body had been in the water for no more than 48 hours, and more likely much less, meaning that the body had been dumped quite recently. The chief inspector of
The early bird gets the deal at the Esplanade. Look for the early bird pricing.
Police said that although the location where the body was found was far from the entrance to the national park, there was a parking lot near the tourist attraction, and so it was possible that the body had been taken there by car. Homicide detectives studied CCTV and traffic cameras to determine Michelle Leng's last movements. They continued to contact her family members, friends, and co-workers for additional information. Also, in addition to the search efforts, interviews continued with relatives and acquaintances in the hope of reconstructing a picture of the event and establishing the full picture of relationships in the family where Michelle lived. Police Inspector Gary Jubelin said with certainty that from all the information that has been collected about Michelle, she was very responsible, always stayed in touch with her family, informing them where she was going, so there were serious fears that there was trouble when she disappeared. However, for 2 days, none of the family noticed the girl was missing or simply didn't want to notice. Police called Derek Barrett in for questioning as the last person to see Michelle alive. Investigators were skeptical of his accounts of nightlife and long daytime naps, so he was re-interviewed. The investigators began asking questions about his relationship with Michelle and asked him to remember the last time he had seen her. Unable to withstand the pressure of the interrogation, Derek refused to answer the questions and demanded a lawyer. Such strange and uncertain behavior led to a number of doubts, and Derek was arrested as a suspect. However, the arrest had grounds. On the eve of the interrogation, investigators checked his cell phone signal and found that he was in the same area where Michelle's body was found on April 24th. When police obtained surveillance footage from a parking lot that captured a car matching the description of Derek Barrett's vehicle in the early morning hours of April 24th, there was no doubt that he was there. Derek denied and claimed to the last that it was just a coincidence and the car was not his, but the footage was clear enough to prove his presence in the parking lot. Police have charged a man in the death of 25-year-old Michelle Leng, whose naked body with multiple stab wounds was found in a blowhole on the central NSW coast. A 27-year-old man has been arrested and charged with murder. The news of the arrest and charge against Derek has left Michelle's entire family in shock. Police spoke to Michelle's mother, who was devastated by the news of her daughter's death. She rushed to Sydney to see the very scene of her only daughter's dream and death. The woman was still unable to comprehend her death. Derek Barrett, 27, married to Michelle Leng's aunt, was charged with the 25-year-old student's murder after police released CCTV footage capturing her last shopping trip in Sydney's central business district on April 21st and her drive home. The footage shows her shopping at a Pitt Street mall before boarding a train at St. James Station for a ride to Campsie in Sydney's southwest. Police believe Michelle returned to her family home in Campsie in the afternoon, where she lived with her uncle, aunt, and cousin. She is presumed to have been murdered in her home. Recall that the autopsy revealed that Michelle tried to fight off her attacker and was stabbed several times in defense, stabbing her more than 30 times in total. CCTV footage is believed to have captured a vehicle entering Lake Moanmorik National Park at around 7 a.m. on April 24th. Police claim Michelle Leng's body was inside the vehicle. Despite Derek Barrett being detained and charged, the investigation continued. Gradually, other details of Michelle Leng's final minutes of life surfaced. Based on these, further charges were laid, including 5 counts of indecent assault, 2 counts of installing a filming device, and murder. The investigation revealed that the suspect had an unhealthy sexual interest in his wife's young niece. When Derek Barrett's cell phone was seized and handed over to specialists to analyze and recover previously deleted data, the files found on the phone left no doubt that he was not only involved in Michelle's death, but had an unhealthy interest in her. It transpired that Derek had set up a hidden camera in the shared bathroom hidden behind toiletries and regularly reviewed the footage. The phone also contained images taken just before Michelle's death. Following these images, it was apparent that Michelle had returned home on April 21st around 5 p.m., and around midnight, she sent her last text message from her phone and had not been heard from since. Deep into the night, Derek Barrett began to put his devious plan into action. He entered Michelle's room again when she was asleep to perform the now customary shoot and satisfaction, but the girl woke up and Derek attacked her. He tied her up and put duct tape over her mouth to keep her quiet. The pervert kept her tied to the bed for 2 days and periodically abused her. In photos on his phone, investigators saw Michelle bound and naked, lying on the bed with a look of horror on her face. However, in these photos, Michelle did not yet have the injuries from which she died. Derek's last picture was taken around 8 a.m. on April 23rd, and at that time Michelle was alive. During the day of April 23rd, Derek's stepson Derek came home twice and did not hear Michelle's quiet moans. Derek was taking a shower at the time. Surveillance cameras determined that Derek left the apartment 4 times to take out the trash. Presumably by this time Michelle was already dead, and Derek, having showered and washed off traces of blood, thoroughly cleaned the house, hiding traces of the crime and Michelle's disappearance. On April 24th at 7 a.m., Derek drove to Snapper Point. On his way, he stopped at a gas station where he bought drinks and filled his car with gasoline. That's where he was caught on CCTV cameras. Upon arriving at Snapper Point, he disposed of Michelle's body and took some pictures around 9 a.m. Afterwards, Derek visited his parents, who noticed nothing unusual in his behavior, and then returned home to await his wife's return. With absolute equanimity, he reported several times that he had not seen Michelle, that the girl had not returned home, and cynically accompanied his wife to the police station to file a missing persons report. On June 29, 2016, the first court hearing was held. Barrett's lawyer, Bill Whitby, told Burwood Local Court that Barrett was pleading not guilty, and he was as shocked and upset by Michelle's death as the rest of the family. Michelle Leng's friends and family were in the packed courtroom, but Derek Barrett did not need to be present. He appeared later via video link. The fact is that the day before, the defendant reported that he didn't remember much in the hours before he killed Michelle Leng because he had taken illegal drugs the day before. He also told the court that he had only vague memories of the 2-hour trip to Snapper Point, where he threw Michelle Leng's body off the cliff. On this basis, before attending the court hearing, Derek Barrett was examined by a psychologist. However, forensic psychologist Dr. Richard First disputed the defendant's claims of memory loss. He testified and found Derek Barrett mentally fit to be punished to the full extent of his sentence. Dr. First testified that the drugs the suspect was taking did not cause memory loss. The doctor claimed that all of his actions were clear and purposeful, from the murder to the disposal of the body. Respected forensic psychiatrist Dr. Richard First also stated that Derek Barrett's IQ, concentration, and memory were within normal limits. He also did not believe Barrett's claims of memory loss, and said the number of stab wounds indicated sadistic tendencies rather than memory lapses and acting on emotions. The psychologist also rejected Derek Barrett's claim that he did not feel sexually attracted to the victim. He bound, gagged, and stabbed the girl 30 times, but Derek Barrett claimed he had no memory of this. Dr. Richard First also told the court that the accused faked amnesia to mitigate his responsibility for the crime after he claimed he could not remember the period when he apprehended and killed Michelle Leng. Speaking at the trial, Derek Barrett tried to explain his crime by claiming that he was addicted to illegal drugs. However, this fact was also challenged by the doctor. Richard First pointed out that Derek's claim was self-defeating because it was obvious that the suspect had gained weight during that time period. Judge Wilson said that in his 30 years as a criminal defense attorney, he had never seen an obese, substance-dependent person. But unfortunately, there was nothing sincere about Derek Barrett's behavior in the courtroom in Sydney. Derek Barrett's behavior in court gave the impression of a psychopath. His crime was not the result of a drunken night out, some poor life choices, or childhood abuse. In August, at a retrial hearing, Derek Barrett pleaded guilty to murdering and kidnapping Michelle Leng, as well as twice sneaking into her room while she slept and making videos. He also admitted taking 19 explicit photos of Michelle Leng shortly before her death. Barrett said he could not remember the 48-hour period during which he killed the girl, including cleaning up the crime scene and dumping her body, because he was under the influence of illegal substances. He said his only memories were of an argument, blood in the bathroom, and the terrified face of his niece screaming at him. However, Judge Wilson said she did not believe Derek Barrett was telling the truth about his memory loss, nor did she believe he was truly sorry for what he had done. The Leng family consoled each other while Derek Barrett wiped away tears, telling them, "I deserve to live. This should never have happened." Passing sentence, Judge Helen Wilson went even further. She said it was a depraved and sadistic act committed by a person in a position of trust with Mrs. Leng. As the judge detailed Derek Barrett's fantasies and actions in front of a packed courtroom, he stared at the floor. He was no longer enjoying the attention, and it was abundantly clear that he had failed to fool anyone. Obviously, the events that had occurred must be seared into his brain, but the killer claimed They were nothing more than flashes in his memory because he had taken drugs a day or two before. He never flinched once in the court sessions, repeating his victim's name over and over again. Speaking to the court, Chief Inspector Gary Jubelin of the NSW Police Homicide Unit said the crime was horrific and senseless. From an investigative point of view, it's nice that we got justice, but there's no joy in a case like this, he said. Judge Helen Wilson sentenced 28-year-old Derek Barrett to 34 years and 6 months in prison for his crime, with a maximum term of 46 years. He will be eligible for parole in 2050. Barrett showed no emotion when he was sentenced. Michelle's mother...
You mad? You still mad? Are you still mad?
Oh, is it because of the bank heist?
Mrs. Jiang thanked the Australian and Chinese communities for their support at a time when she is suffering greatly. She also thanked the NSW police, including Detective Inspector Gary Jubelin of the Homicide Squad, for investigating her daughter's death. A fund has been set up to pay for Miss Leng's funeral and to support her mother when she returns to China. But Michelle Leng's sad story did not end there. 4 years after the crime, inexplicable events occurred in one family. A woman often visited her elderly mother, and on one of these visits she found her sitting in a chair in the kitchen with an unknown USB device in her hands. When the daughter plugged the USB drive into her computer, she saw that it contained graphic videos and photos of obscene content and contacted the police. The thumb drive contained 9 video files that lasted more than an hour and 13 files with photos of Michelle Leng being abused shortly before she was murdered on April 23, 2016. The woman had no discernible connection to Derek Barrett, lived about 4 miles from his former home in Campsie, and it is not known where the USB drive came from or how it came into her family home. Police were able to match the photos to those that Derek Barrett deleted from his phone before his arrest in an attempt to hide his crimes from police. In 2020, Derek Barrett was charged with a number of sex offenses after videos of him abusing Michelle Leng were found on the USB drive in November 2019. But police and prosecutors admitted they were at an impasse over the discovery of the device, which led to the new charges. Prosecutor Hugh Baker told the court that the elderly woman with dementia was confined to the house and only went out into the yard. There is no explanation as to how the USB drive ended up in the woman's hands at the house in Strathfield, Baker told the court. Based on new facts and evidence, Derek Barrett has had his sentence extended without parole after images found by chance revealed the full extent of his abuse of Michelle before he murdered her. This horrifying, depraved secret, found by chance in the hands of an elderly woman in a leafy Sydney suburb, resulted in the convicted criminal receiving additional years of deserved punishment to his already lengthy sentence. Friends and acquaintances honored Michelle Leng on Chinese and Australian social media. Every story wants to be summarized, to break it down into its components in order to approach and understand whether it is possible, by changing the chain of events, to prevent bullying, fear, and crime. Obviously, unemployed Derek Barrett had nothing to do. The young man was in the active phase of puberty and physical strength, lying at his computer all day and night, doing nothing, and demons took hold of his rotten soul. Perhaps if he had been working, there would have been no strength or desire for lust. But in this story, Derek's laziness, Aunt Michelle's pity, and her cousin's indifference played a cruel trick on her that cost her 2 days of humiliation, fear, and pain. Dear friends, cherish life because you never know which day will be your last. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel. There are many shocking stories ahead of you.
Heavy groceries driving you nuts? Let us do the heavy lifting. Order pickup and delivery today.
In the ongoing investigation of a woman who was found chained in a storage container in rural South Carolina.
Just a girl. Just a girl. Just a girl. How are you, honey?
He says he's dead and buried. He says there's several bodies dead and buried out here.
We have Kayla.
Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Even the most enigmatic disappearances of people, which leave no trace, eventually find their explanations over time. Those missing either make contact themselves, or the police manage to dig deep enough to uncover the truth and solve the case. Unfortunately, unsolved crimes involving abductions and serious crimes do occur, though they are much rarer. However, sometimes the investigation is just one step away from a breakthrough, but for some reason, the full picture remains elusive. The case of a young Canadian woman named Alicia Ross, who vanished without a trace in the middle of the night from her own bedroom, would likely have remained unsolved. The police were unable to find either a body or any significant evidence, and as a result, the investigation merely stagnated, attempting to stitch together a case against an innocent person who was suspected from the start. It might have ended up that way had the criminal not turned himself in to the police. It's hard to determine whether a sudden onset of conscience or a mental disorder was the cause, though it was probably a combination of both. But let's start from the beginning and dissect this complex story with an unexpected twist. Who was Alicia Ross? Alicia Ross was born on February 8, 1980, in the Canadian city of Markham, in the province of Ontario. There is no information about her biological parents. It is only known that they relinquished their rights to the child, and she was adopted at a few months old by a couple named Marvin and Sharon Ross. Her adoptive parents surrounded her with love and care. They did everything to ensure that their daughter wanted for nothing and could fully develop her talents. When Alicia started school, her adoptive parents decided to divorce, but they maintained a friendly relationship and continued to participate together in their daughter's life. Soon, Sharon remarried, and her new husband, named Julius Forrest, treated the child as if she were his own daughter. The girl did well in school, excelled in drawing, and also had a passion for photography and loved discovering new cities and countries. After finishing school, she spent a year in Australia, where she traveled and enjoyed life before returning home and enrolling in university. In the summer of 2005, the 25-year-old Alicia went on a hiking trip in the mountains with her friends. She loved spending time in nature, away from the hustle and bustle of city life. There, she met a young man named Sean Hine, with whom she began a romantic relationship in early July. He was 4 years her senior. He was already 29 at the time, but the slight age difference did not bother the couple. At that time, Ross still lived in her adoptive parents' home, where she occupied the basement with a separate entrance, thus having her own space and living independently from her parents. On August 16th, the young woman, together with her adoptive mother and their dogs, went for a walk in the park. Alicia appeared happy and shared that she was expecting a promotion at work to the position of senior sales manager in the coming days. She was very proud, as she had been working hard for a long time, and her efforts were finally about to pay off. Additionally, the young woman talked to her mother about her boyfriend Sean, whom she had been dating for just over a month, but seemed deeply in love. Alicia hoped that this romance could develop into something more significant in the future, and expressed a desire to introduce her beau to her adoptive parents by arranging a family dinner. After the walk in the park, the mother headed home, and her daughter went on a date with her beloved, promising not to stay out late because she needed to get up early for work the next day, where her promotion was to be decided. The women said goodbye and went their separate ways. Sharon never saw her daughter alive again. The mysterious disappearance from her own home. That evening, after meeting with Sean, Alicia invited him to her house. They had a great time together, and close to midnight, the young man left for home. Alicia walked him to the gate, which served as a second exit from the yard. They kissed goodbye, and then he left, promising to call her as soon as he got home. Around midnight, as promised, Sean called his girlfriend, but she didn't pick up the phone. He wasn't overly concerned, thinking Alicia had simply fallen asleep since she had to get up early for work. However, the next morning,
We gotta go!
he tried to call her again and she still didn't pick up. He became genuinely worried and contacted a mutual acquaintance who worked in the same office with Ross. From her, he learned that Alicia hadn't come to work, and he immediately rushed to her house. On the morning of August 17th, Sharon and Julius were planning to play golf with friends, and they left the house around 10 o'clock. They noticed their daughter's car in the driveway, but thought little of it, assuming a colleague had picked her up. So the couple went about their day. About half an hour later, Sean arrived at the Ross residence, and finding no sign of Alicia there, he called the police to report a person missing. He also immediately contacted Sharon, informing her of the situation. The couple, alarmed by the news, dropped everything and hurried home, where the police were already present by then. Thus, Sean Hine was the first person to notice the girl's disappearance and to inform the authorities. Moreover, he was the last person to see Alicia alive and well the evening before she vanished. According to him, they had said goodbye at the gate, where his car was parked around midnight, and she hadn't been in touch since then, with her whereabouts unknown. When Sharon and Julius approached the house, law enforcement was already there, inspecting the area and speaking with Sean, who had called them. The young man was visibly nervous and looked distraught. When the mother looked into Alicia's room, she immediately noticed that all her daughter's personal belongings, without which she never left the house, were in their places. Her purse, passport, driver's license, keys, cell phone, as well as her bank cards and cash, were all left in the room, indicating she wouldn't have gone anywhere, let alone left without them. The gate was open but not forced, suggesting that the missing person either let her abductor in herself or willingly left with someone from the yard. In the backyard, the police found some disorder. The lawn and flowers in one spot were trampled as if someone had fallen there. Also, a pair of cigarettes and the right sandal of the girl, one she had been wearing the evening before, were found on the ground, laid out in a straight line. Neither Alicia nor her parents smoked, so the cigarettes didn't belong to them. And Sean claimed he never smoked that particular brand, leaving it unclear to whom they belonged and why they were arranged in such a strange manner. The prime suspect. Sean was almost immediately considered the prime suspect. Firstly, he was noticeably nervous, and his account seemed somewhat confused and disjointed. Secondly, he was the first to report his girlfriend's disappearance to the police, even before speaking with her parents and confirming that they too had not seen her. Thus, he definitely knew she was missing. Additionally, law enforcement found biological traces on the girl's bed, belonging both to her and Sean. Based on this, the investigation speculated that Alicia might have denied Sean intimacy, and he decided to force her, then, trying to cover his tracks, staged her disappearance, which he likely caused by ending her life. When Sean was brought to the station, questioned, and the investigator's theory presented to him, the young man was stunned. He was dismayed to be the prime suspect and swore he would never harm his girlfriend as he loved her. He also admitted that they did indeed have intimate moments that evening, but insisted it was consensual. The missing girl's parents also had nothing bad to say about Sean. He hadn't argued with their daughter, hadn't mistreated her, and she spoke only well of him, their relationship progressing rapidly and quite happily, so much so that Alicia even hoped to have a future with him. Moreover, The Forreses noted that their daughter had no plans or reasons to leave. She was eagerly awaiting a promotion at her beloved job, and being a responsible person, she would never just leave everything behind. But even if some unforeseen circumstances had arisen, she would certainly have informed her parents, and definitely would not have left without her documents, money, and phone. The police lacked sufficient evidence or grounds to detain Sean, and so after questioning him at the station, they released him. Nevertheless, law enforcement did not rule him out as a suspect and continued to keep an eye on the young man. Sean himself appeared depressed and very upset. The extensive search effort. The search for the missing woman commenced the day after her disappearance. Initially, a thorough inspection of the home and yard was conducted, and investigators closely examined the surrounding area and interviewed neighbors. However, no one reported hearing or seeing anything suspicious that night. Law enforcement theorized that the woman vanished sometime between midnight, when she said goodbye to Sean, and sunrise, a time when the streets are usually quiet and deserted, making it difficult to find witnesses. Flyers with Alicia's photos were distributed throughout the city, listing phone numbers where people could provide any information about her whereabouts. The story of the missing woman was featured in the news and made headlines in popular publications, generating significant public interest and prompting hundreds of volunteers and concerned citizens to join the search. The police received dozens of calls daily related to the case. Although most information turned out to be false or mistaken, each tip and theory was investigated in the hope of finding any leads. The search area continually expanded, involving more people, and thorough checks were conducted in abandoned buildings, wooded areas, and wastelands. Sean also actively participated in the search efforts, despite still being the prime suspect. Feeling wronged, the young man turned to the media and gave a significant interview, where he shared how deeply he loved Alicia, and displayed photos of them looking very happy together. He tearfully pleaded for help in the search, appearing utterly devastated by the situation. The search for Ross became one of the most extensive operations in Ontario's history. Every difficult-to-reach place, ravine, and marshy area was scoured, but no clues, leads, or even hints about the missing woman's location were found. Her parents also appealed to the public through the media, expressing their belief that their daughter was alive but being held against her will somewhere. They implored whoever had their daughter to let her return home unharmed and not to harm her in any way. Sean's unexpected arrest. The police leaned towards the theory that someone Alicia knew personally had abducted and possibly ended her life. This hypothesis was supported by the lack of signs of struggle, no evidence of forced entry, and the gate being left open, but no concrete leads were found. The cigarettes found on the ground bore only a heavily smeared fingerprint, which couldn't be identified. Investigators thoroughly checked Alicia's contacts and reviewed all calls and messages on her phone and email, yet nothing suspicious was uncovered. On the 6th day of the search, the case was officially reclassified as a criminal act, despite the lack of evidence, and Sean remained the prime suspect. Sean lived alone in his own house about 10 miles from Alicia's home. After realizing that public suspicion had intensified following his media appearance, he stopped participating in the search and refused to speak with the press. Investigators interviewed Sean 3 more times, but his story remained consistent. He was then offered a lie detector test, which he refused, convincing the police even more firmly that he was involved in the crime. 2 weeks after the disappearance, Sean was arrested on an unrelated charge. He was taken into custody late at night for driving under the influence and resisting arrest. Speculations arose that he was drowning his guilt in alcohol. Following Sean's arrest, Alicia's parents gave another interview, sharing that they had not personally known the young man and only knew about him through their daughter's accounts. They believed she was happy, but now Sharon considered the possibility that her daughter might have withheld certain details to avoid upsetting them, though she had planned to introduce her boyfriend to her family soon. Police interviewed Sean's neighbors to determine if they had noticed anything unusual recently, such as him disposing of large trash bags.
Some ways I incorporate moving into my daily routine are actually life routines. I have a young child in my life.
Behaving suspiciously, leaving unexpectedly, or cleaning his car. However, no significant information emerged from these inquiries. Detectives were left hoping that Sean might eventually confess to everything. An unexpected turn in the case. About a month after the disappearance of Alicia, the buzz surrounding her case began to fade gradually. The search continued, but it was no longer featured in newspapers or news broadcasts, and the investigation seemed to have hit a dead end. The only option left for law enforcement was to keep pressing Sean, hoping he would crack and confess to everything. Then a completely unexpected twist occurred in the case. On September 20th, 2005, more than a month after Ross disappeared, 31-year-old Daniel Sylvester, who lived nearby, called the police and confessed to ending the girl's life, pointing out where he had hidden her body. It's important to note that this man was never under suspicion, and the police had not considered him at all during their investigation. Initially, it seemed that the man simply craved fame and attention, and thus decided to take responsibility for the most notorious case in recent years. However, all doubts were dispelled when the police found the girl's body at the location he had indicated. Who is Daniel Sylvester? But let's first delve into who this new person of interest is, and why the police hadn't taken an interest in him earlier. Daniel Sylvester was an unemployed recluse living in his mother's house, which was adjacent to the Ross family home. Their properties were separated by overgrown shrubs, forming a virtually impenetrable barrier. Although the criminal and the victim had lived practically their whole lives side by side, they had never interacted before. Alicia had seen Daniel a few times on his property and considered him mentally unwell because of his odd behavior. Indeed, he had had serious socialization issues from an early age, never had friends, was mocked at school, and every attempt at forming relationships ended in complete failure, causing him to harbor a deep resentment towards all women. As a child, girls called him a loser and said they would never associate with someone like him. At the age of 8, Sylvester was diagnosed with socialized behavioral disorder and had been under continuous psychological care, although therapy didn't help much. In his teenage years, he confessed that he dreamt of suddenly attacking a girl and overpowering her. This thought excited him, but specialists were confident that such fantasies would remain just in his imagination. After finishing school, Daniel stopped attending therapy sessions, decided not to continue his education, and became a recluse. He lived in his mother's house, almost completely isolating himself from the outside world. He spent his days sitting in his room, often on adult websites, and occasionally ventured out in the evenings to secretly watch his neighbors, peeping into their windows. He especially enjoyed watching when someone was engaging in lovemaking. This spectacle excited him, yet Daniel remained a virgin well into his 30s, satisfying himself with solitary activities. The neighbors hardly ever saw him, and thus considered him a harmless guy, the mutilated body. Initially, Sylvester claimed that the girl's death was accidental, and he hid the body to avoid punishment. According to him, when he realized the girl showed no signs of life, he placed her in the trunk of his mother's car and drove about 50 miles out of town, hiding the body in a bushy ravine by the side of a country road. 3 weeks later, fearing that the body would be discovered, he moved it in the middle of the night even further away, to a deserted area. The body was found in the place Daniel indicated, thereby dispelling the last doubts about his guilt. However, the condition of the remains indicated that the girl had been dealt with extreme cruelty. The injuries were such that it looked as if she had been hit by a car. An autopsy showed that Alicia had nearly all her ribs broken, her neck, both arms, and also suffered extensive closed cranial trauma with internal bleeding. The exact cause of death could not be determined, but at least 3 injuries were incompatible with life. Forensic experts were shocked, as they had never encountered anything like it before. It was now necessary to clarify all the circumstances and chronology of events of that fateful evening to learn how exactly the girl received such injuries. The full picture and chronology of events. Initially, the convict claimed that he had an argument with his neighbor on a bush-covered path between their homes. At some point during the verbal altercation, she called him a loser, which angered him, and he struck the girl on the head. When she fell, he kicked her several times in the chest. When he realized she was not breathing, he decided to hide the body, and then moved it again when the search area expanded. However, something in his story did not add up. There were missing details and specifics. For instance, it was unclear what Daniel was doing at his neighbor's house at night, why they began arguing, what caused such a brutal beating, and why the evidence found at the scene was laid out in a straight line. Restoring the full picture of events was challenging, but law enforcement managed to do so. That evening, Sylvester went out to spy on his neighbors. He noticed that Alicia's boyfriend had come over.
Like empires, prices rise and fall.
Acorn TV has every episode of Midsummer Murders.
Sounds like there's a win. And he approached their house closely. As the couple was being intimate, he watched them from a window. Then he moved back to the bushes, but did not leave. Closer to midnight, the lovers went outside and kissed by the gate, just a couple of feet away from the lurking neighbor. When Sean left, the girl returned to the yard and noticed Daniel. She became very angry, realizing that he had been spying on her and her boyfriend all this time. She started yelling at him, calling him a pervert, and demanded that he leave immediately. Finally, Ross called him a loser, after which she turned around and was about to go back into the house. But this last word acted as a trigger, because that's exactly what other girls had called him in childhood. Sylvester was filled with rage, punched the girl powerfully on the head, and knocked her to the ground. She tried to resist and grabbed her attacker's hair, but he began to choke her. When his grip loosened, Daniel quickly stood up and began kicking Alicia while she lay down. He mostly struck her chest, back, neck, and head. Forensic experts later counted 33 fractures on the victim's body and extensive internal bleeding. When the man realized that his neighbor was dead, he moved her body to his garage, stripped her naked, and then masturbated according to his statement to relieve tension. The examination confirmed that Sylvester did not violate the body. He then put the corpse in the trunk of his mother's car and took it to a secluded place outside the city. Upon returning home, the criminal took a shower, changed clothes, and behaved as if nothing had happened. His clothes, as well as the victim's belongings and the towels he used to clean the crime scene, were packed in trash bags and disposed of. The trial and sentence. The court proceedings for this case began only in April 2007, at which time new details were made public. The defendant confessed that he ended his neighbor's life, but he and his lawyer insisted that it was unintentional. Moreover, the defense demanded a psychiatric evaluation, noting that Daniel was ill and should not be held accountable for his actions, suggesting he be treated in a clinic instead of being incarcerated. However, the prosecution argued that despite his mental illness and issues with anger management, Sylvester acted with full awareness of the consequences of his actions. He mercilessly kicked the girl with full force, knowing that it would likely result in her death. Nevertheless, the ordered psychiatric evaluation confirmed that the defendant could indeed be fully responsible for his actions. Regarding the items found in the backyard, Daniel never confessed to having placed them there, arranged in a straight line. On May 7, 2007, the defendant was found guilty of second-degree crime and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 16 years. A year later, Canadian singer-songwriter Kathleen Edwards wrote a song titled Alicia Ross, which depicted the events from the young woman's perspective during the last minutes of her life. Thanks for watching, guys.
Normal checking accounts sit there as you withdraw and pay fees. Okay. But EQ Bank is like a checking account without the fees and Pays you high interest.
Could you have explained that without touching my food?
Nope, that would have been tough.
Heavy groceries driving you nuts?
Okay, guys, I'm gonna finish this round off, and then I'm getting off for the night and go watch a movie, as I gotta get up early tomorrow. I got a stove that's being delivered to the apartment that I got renovated. But tomorrow I'll probably be playing Battlefield. We'll see how late it is tomorrow. I do have like I said, I got to finish off Renos. I missed some stuff, so gotta finish that off, take some photos, and then we'll see how late I'll be on Battlefield tomorrow. I haven't been really in the mood of playing Battlefield. I don't know why. I think Battlefield's more, I don't know, I think it's starting to fade off. Fade off, I'm not into the game anymore. Probably because I just don't have enough people to play it with. So yeah. Go fill up my cedar. And now fiddle this side up. Okay, guys, I'm out of here. I am signing off for the night. I am gonna go watch a movie and relax, and I shall see you all later. Peace.